Where's my thumbs up?
I'll give you, yeah.
Good. All right. Hey, folks, welcome to the first. This is the first Visual Studio Code release. What is this? It's a release party. I think we're calling it a release party. There's no cake here, but it is a release party. This is the first time that we tried this. This is a live stream. We have a lot of folks from the VS Code team that are on the call today. So we want to thank you for joining us. We're just sort of trying this out. We ship a lot of new features in VS Code, and we ship them regularly and rapidly, and so it can be hard, to say the least, to keep up with what's new inside of VS Code. And so we thought we'd spend maybe just 30 minutes with you today showing you some of the things that are new inside of VS Code, some of the larger items. And then we want to give you some time at the end to ask some questions and talk directly to the VS Code team. So we're going to do that as well. So please drop your questions in the chat as we go along. There's an icon down there somewhere where you can chat. And you can drop them along the way, and we'll go through about 30 minutes, then we'll answer all of your questions towards the end there after about 30 minutes. Quick housekeeping note, just please be kind in chat. I just want to thank you in advance for doing that, and we're so glad that you're here with us this morning. We're very excited to do this with you. This is new for us too. So with all of that out of the way, let's get right to it. We're going to be talking about release notes today, which is super exciting. What more exciting topic is there than release notes? So this is the screen that you see. Let me make sure I have the right screen shared here. Inside of Visual Studio Code, you will see when you pull it up, let's look at our release notes for, let's see here. That's right. So when you pull up Visual Studio Code after it updates, this is the screen that you get. You get the release notes, and we know that you read every word inside of these release notes, and we're sure that you stop whatever you're doing and you slowly scroll through and read everything. We know that you're not doing that. You don't have time, and so we want to help you understand what some of those exciting things are. Before we do that, though, we're going to jump back just a little bit here. And by the way, if you ever close this page out and you just want to bring it back, you can open your command palette and you can actually show the release notes from the command palette, just FYI. But let's go to the updates on vscode.com. And you can see here, you can scroll back through all of the different updates, but we're going to jump back to May just a little bit and start with something called the flexible view and panel layout, because this wasn't something that I was even aware of until it was showed to me. So we want to show it to you today. And I think Steven is going to talk to us about the flexible layout improvements that we shipped in the May 2020 update. Steven?
Yeah, can you hear me?
We can.
Awesome. Okay, so I'm on 2 devices, so if this works. I'll just start sharing my code window here. It looks like that's working. Okay, so yeah, the flexible layout. So for a long time, VS Code has had a pretty static layout, and so people didn't really notice this happen or this change. So we're working on making things a little bit more flexible. So the first step here is we have all these views. We call them views, the things inside of this container. And we want to be able to move them around. So we'll call these containers, these icons and these titles here, and everything inside of it is views. So the first example I want to do is a pretty simple thing. For a long time, we had a setting to move search to the panel. So let's do a little demo where we move search to the panel. So now we can just drag and drop that, and you'll see when we get these little indicators here where it's going to drop. So we drop it, and now we have search in the panel, and so that's pretty cool. So now we can just drag and drop. It's a little more intuitive, and if you hadn't used VS Code for a long time, you might try that automatically. But if you used it for a long time, you might not even know that's a possibility. So now you do. So then something else we can do is not just like move views across from the left or the sidebar to the panel. We can also combine things. So one thing you might want to do, and I've seen a lot of people on the team doing this, is combining debug and terminal. So you can run your code over here, and then it might auto attach, and then you can use the debug console over here. So you can use those in one view. So that's pretty cool. And then I got one more that I prepared, which is I think I had in the release notes, which is pretty exciting. So extension views are included in this. It's not just built-in views that we can move around and combine. So one of the things you might want to do is create your own source control view with all sorts of different things. So the big one is GitLens. GitLens used to have a way to just bring everything into, it might still, I'm not totally sure, but used to have a setting to bring all of the views into source control, but we can actually do that just by drag and drop. So if we drag this icon, we hover over the source control icon, and then we drop GitLens, and you can see this split behavior. We want to drop it at the bottom. Then all the GitLens views are now like just put in here, and we have this like mega source control view. So we have built-in one, all GitLens stuff, and then another one, timeline up here, also might be useful. So let's bring that in there. So we'll just put that at the top here. So now we have all these views in here. So we have tons of views that are related to source control, and it's our own custom one. So that's my short demo, but get crazy with it and let us know what you think and what different layouts you're using.
Very cool. So my first thought here, Stephen, is it seems like, so this is rad, but what happens if you drag your VS Code into a state where you're like, oh my gosh, I just want to go back to VS Code like it was before? It seems like it'd be easy to do that.
Yeah, so we have two ways to do that. So let's just say you moved one view and you didn't want it to be there anymore. So like terminal. So you can right click a view and click reset location. Now just put it back where it should start. But let's say you totally screwed up. We have this command reset view location. So that's Control-Shift-P. Reset view locations, and this should reset everything back to how you had it originally.
Nice. Full hard reset there. I like it. And these settings persist across, when you close the editor down and open it back up, it persists?
Yep. Yeah. So we save that, and it'll actually, if you have multiple windows and you're dragging things, then it'll affect all the multiple windows in sync. And then if you're using setting sync as it rolls out, that'll also persist across that as well. Very
cool. All right, that's the new, what do we call that? Flexible UI. So you can drag things inside of VS Code around and make it your own.
Yep.
The next thing that we wanted to talk about here was, let's go back to my screen and let's go back to the, let's see here. Let's move to the June release highlights. And there's and actually I think this one, so this is May. So yeah, so let's look at June. There's a new JavaScript debugger in the June release. I have so many questions about this as to like, why do we need a new JavaScript debugger? So to do that, we're going to bring on Connor to talk about the new JavaScript debugger in VS Code, which is a bigger deal than it might sound like on the surface. So with that, Connor, are you ready to go?
Yeah, so like that intro, the pressure is on to make this really awesome awesome demo here. So yeah, so actually last fall, some people like from the Chrome DevTools team came and joined Microsoft, and they started working on a new debugger. So previously our old debugger was made, I think, like probably basically like around 5 years ago. And since then, kind of like web technologies have changed, like Node is getting better. And there were a few kind of like fundamental things that we wanted to change about like how debugging worked. So I have a small demo here that I can go ahead and share my screen. Let's see.
Yeah, let's check it out.
Yeah, so oops, wrong editor. So like here, I put together basically like a small app that does really slow spell checking. So it's really inefficient, but I can go ahead and check it out. So the first thing to do if I wanted to actually be able to debug this is like normally I'd have to like go in and like create a launch.json. I'd have to like fiddle with configurations. But something new we have with the debugger is called the debug terminal, and this is kind of a magical terminal where anything I type in it gets debugged. So you can create it in two ways. Like you can open the command palette and use the create JavaScript debug terminal command here, or it's also inside of the terminal switcher here. So you can just say create JavaScript debug terminal from the switcher, and then this will open up the terminal. And so this is like kind of like my magic terminal. You see, if I type node, then I get debugging. So if I wanted to actually debug the server, I can go ahead and do node server, just like README says. And now it looks like, yeah, the server running, it says it's listening on that address here. So something else that's cool is that, yeah, if I wanted to actually like debug a browser, normally I'd have to create a launch configuration for that. But because we're in the debug terminal, I can actually just control click on this link here, and then that automatically, you can see there, opens the browser, and I'm already debugging it right here. So in this app, I can just like enter words and I can say like cool, and then this should fix it to just cool as a spell checked version, or hello, spell checks to Halo, which is also correct. Not those after, but also correct. So if I wanted to debug this, I have some client JavaScript code here. So you'll see that when this button is clicked, then it looks like it sends a message to a web worker here. So before, if you wanted to debug web workers inside of VS Code, you really couldn't, because we only kind of had the concept of like one page, and that was like your only debug target. Whereas now you can actually see here inside the call stack view, we can actually see the worker going on here. So if I wanted to maybe try this again real quick. So I stopped here, and now because like we're aware of all these different targets, I can actually just step into the web worker. So normally, like this was something that you couldn't do before at all. So I'm actually basically inside of a different thread right now. So you can see it makes a request to my server. It gets that back, and then I can step again back into my kind of main thread here, and you can see this is where it actually sets that message right there. So that's something. Also, like one cool addition that we added is profiling. So right now that spell checking is kind of slow. If I wanted to figure out why it was slow, I could open my server, and we'll see that it looks like basically we have a huge list of every English word, and then we go through every word and get the distance between that word and my input, and then whatever is the best word, then we choose that. So if I wanted to actually like kind of profile this, see like maybe is this function really slow or is something else happening, I could go ahead and do that. So I'll submit this again. Now we hit a breakpoint. So basically I want to profile the code between here and between when I return. So I'll set a breakpoint there, and then I'll hit this little record icon to take a profile. So I can do that, and then I can choose whether I want to like stop it manually, whether I want to run for a period of time, or whether I want to run just to another breakpoint. So here, I'll just pick that breakpoint to run to. We can just run to all of them, that's fine. And now it's profiling. So when it's that breakpoint, then it'll open up the profile automatically for me. This is the table view that if you've used the Chrome DevTools before, or if you've used profilers before, this is pretty familiar to you. We also have a frame graph here, so we can see it looks like, yep, pretty much all inside of that the edit distance function. I can control click to go to any of this code here, and then you'll see we also have code lenses that tell you how much time is taken in each function. And this is just a single function, so it's not that interesting. You can also see inside the server. It looks like this was annotated to indicating that we spent basically all of our time inside this little spell check line right here. So these are a few new things for debugging. If you go to the release notes, we linked a page that has lots more new features. And yeah, if you have any problems, open up issues for me, and I will look at them as soon as I can.
So this is really cool stuff, man. And this, when I was going through the release notes, I realized that this was a much bigger deal than I thought that it was. So I guess one of the things that I had a question about is that in the release notes, it says that it's a clean room rewrite of the debugger. And I wasn't entirely sure what that meant. So I just thought I'd clarify. What exactly does that mean?
Yeah, so yeah, basically means this is kind of a new debugger from the ground up. So it doesn't really share any direct ancestry with the old debuggers. Whereas like before, we kind of had like basically like 3 generations of debuggers in VS Code that's also shared with Visual Studio itself. Whereas this is basically a totally new family of or it doesn't have any like common ancestors with the existing debugger.
Yeah, and I noticed that when I was reading through the release notes, I thought, well, I'm not sure we need a new debugger. I thought the other one, I didn't have that many gripes about it. But then as I was going through and reading some of the stuff that it did, I was like, oh yeah, that was a problem. So for instance, like log points, it used to be if you got your expressions wrong in log points, it would just swallow the error and your log point wouldn't work and you wouldn't know why. But it looks like in the release notes now it shells out an error and it says it gives you an error instead of just swallowing your log point. Is that correct?
Yeah, like there's probably like dozens of like kind of quality of life improvements. Like but like like I said, kind of like the big fundamental change as far as like actually how we structure code is dealing with multiple targets, because like more and more frameworks now, like you see like people trying to like move all their like DOM operations or all their expensive operations to web workers, to service workers and everything, and you can now debug those. Like we also have, for example, like better auto-completion inside the terminal, like much closer to kind of like what you're getting from DevTools, which is also like very good auto-completion there. There's dozens of things. So if you've used debugging, or if you use debugging frequently, you should definitely read through the notes, and you might find new things that you want to take advantage of.
Yeah, I like that statement about quality of life improvements, because it's exactly what it is. I think Scott Hanselman calls it like death by 1,000 cuts, but it's one of those things where like the new debugger removes 1,000 cuts that you don't realize are there as you use it. Some other ones that I found that were quite interesting was like you can do what they call like an unattached await, so you can just call async functions from the terminal, whereas before you couldn't do that because you're outside of an async function, but you can do that now. Or the fact that you can pretty print minified code. So a lot of times when you break inside of VS Code, you just get that block of just garbage, but now you can select them, it will pretty print it, which makes it at least possible to possibly debug it there. So lots of really cool stuff there. All right, I feel like we could spend a lot more time on the exciting topic of debugging, but let's talk about notebooks, this is a new concept for me. Notebooks is, I think it's a Python thing, but something that looks fascinating as a JavaScript developer. And so with that, let's turn it over to Miguel to talk a bit about notebooks, what they are, and what's new in the June release.
Yeah, definitely. So hi, my name is Miguel. So we've been working on improving the notebook experience inside of VS Code. So currently we have other extensions like Python that allows you to create and run notebooks, but we're wanting to sort of bring that native experience and performance to notebooks. So we've been working on creating a native API that other extensions can then hook into to make notebooks run more performant. And so let me share my screen and then kind of show you a little bit about some of the new things we've been working on. So currently, this API is currently in the works, and so we have a notebook that we've created that would help our team kind of dog food this experience, and we're leveraging GitHub issues. So if you look into the marketplace, there's a GitHub issues notebook. Currently, it requires insiders, but once you kind of install it, you can start using it. So this is sort of like our own version of, if we created a notebook for ourselves, how can we then sort of test all of these new features that we're working on? So if you install this issue from the marketplace, this will allow you then to query issues from GitHub and sort of use this as a notebook experience. So I'll show you a little bit about how you do that. So I already have it installed. All it is appending the .github issues. So if I do new .github-issues, I should sort of get this kind of blank experience here. So what I can then do is start typing in different queries. So just in the same way that you can use GitHub queries, for example, like repos, you can also type repos as well. So if I go, if I want to query issues from the Microsoft VS Code repo, I can just go ahead and type in Microsoft. Actually, I think it's Microsoft/VS Code, and then wait for the intelligence to kind of pop in. And then what I can do is, so let's say I want to get all open issues, and then let's say I want to say all that are assigned to me. And so what we can also do is use the @me as sort of like a shortcut. And then once you do that, you can hit Control-Enter to sort of execute a notebook cell. And so here, then you get sort of all of the list of issues that basically are assigned to me that are open. And so this is sort of just like the beginning of how sort of this specific notebook works. You can also go in and add markdown headings. So if I wanted to go down here and hit plus markdown, you can do something like my issues if you want to try to label these issues. And then you can kind of reorder some of these cells back and forth to then, organize the notebook in whatever structure you'd want to. And so for notebook headings, this allows you then to kind of fold items into each item. So for example, this heading here is sort of like an H1. Anything below the H1 gets nested underneath. So you can then have multiple structures on a notebook. So this is just sort of like one basic example. Another example that we kind of use internally is if you have the VS Code repo, we have sort of like a notebooks folder that has some of the notebooks issues that we use on the team. So this one here just has at the very top level, we have sort of these like macro level defined variables. So like, for example, we have multiple repos that we work in. So there's like the VS Code remote release, the JS debug, the pull request. So there's multiple issues here or multiple repos. You can then define sort of a variable that says, hey, when we reference repos, reference all of these repos. And then you can also define other ones. So we define like milestone, which milestone. So if we change this to, July, once we move into July, it'll then update all the queries to then run from those ones. So instead of trying to run each of these one by one, I could also go up to the top right and we have sort of this run all action. What this will do, it'll basically run through each cell one by one and run all of the cells in order. So this is a little bit faster if you're just wanting to run all these together. So this is just kind of a little basic on how notebooks work inside of VS Code, and this is just specific for GitHub issues. One of some of the newer UI features that we've done is we've actually added some color tokens so that it allows theme authors to sort of theme these notebooks to look the way that they want them to. So if I were to switch to, let's say, the GitHub dark theme, you can kind of see what this would look like. So here, we've introduced a couple of different new color theme tokens. So right now I'm kind of using these sort of sets. So we have, cell border, being able to change the hover colors. When things are in focus, you can change the background and border and also the border. So if I were to sort of comment these out, you can kind of see what the default view looks like. So right now in this theme, it's using, this blue border. But I kind of like how they have this kind of red-orange color. So what I ended up just doing was kind of overriding those colors and just making those look in the way that I want them to look. So it allows you sort of to work that way. And so in this issue or in this notebook, you can kind of see how we've sort of structured this. We have multiple issues and multiple categories of issues. And so yeah, so this is just kind of like a quick summary of how notebooks work inside of the GitHub issues notebook. But we're hoping in the next few releases, once the other teams like the Python extension adopts this new core API, it allows the other extension authors to then kind of reuse this API. And so hopefully the Python extension will be able to adopt this pretty soon, and then everybody else will be able to have access to this sort of new UI.
Okay, Miguel, I have so many questions, and we don't have a lot of time, but I'm going to try to ask the ones that I can. So first of all, notebooks is kind of a new concept for some of us as developers. It's just not something that we're used to using or seeing. So would it be accurate to say that at a high level that a notebook is like the combination of Markdown and a REPL, sort of a runnable code in a file that you can then save and then share with other people?
Yeah, definitely, absolutely. And then it kind of allows you to sort of work very interactively. So if you work with a lot of data, being able to sort of like show somebody what your process is on how you sort of process that data and just show kind of like step-by-step process. So it kind of helps others sort of understand on how you've kind of constructed your data, but then also in different ways on how you can kind of visualize that data as well. It's kind of like an interactive writing experience.
So as a JavaScript developer, the first thing that I tried to do was make a JavaScript notebook, because I saw in the release notes it actually referenced something called a nodebook, N-O-D-E book, but I wasn't able to find that in the. Do we need extensions to make this experience work? How does this work, and how can I get a notebook?
Yeah, so all it takes is for an extension to then start using some of these APIs that we've written. And so somebody could very easily create a JavaScript notebook. Someone could create, for any other language that you want, you can kind of create these notebook experiences. So we are working on trying to create other notebook experiences that can be leveraged to help people sort of better understand their code, but also how to share those with others as well to be able to be understood better as well. Awesome.
So that's a direct call for everybody out there on the live stream. Please build a JavaScript notebook. The world needs you. All right, we got a few minutes left here, and I want to make sure that we get to Logan, who's going to talk about a new Hex Editor experience inside of VS Code. This is quite interesting because I remember editing hex files in the past. I think they were like EXEs. I can't remember why I was doing it. It's good to know that you can do it. Logan, to you to show us the Hex Editor improvements in VS Code.
Yeah, so the Hex Editor extension is just like one of the many possibilities now that the new custom editor API is out. So I'm sure we'll see more of these, but let me just share my screen and I'll kind of go through kind of what it looks like to open a hex file, edit a file, and then why this is kind of neat. So here's the logo for the Hex Editor extension, and I can open the command palette, and then I can reopen with, and then I can select, right now we're in the image preview, which is kind of a read-only custom editor, if you will, and then I can open it in text where it will fail, or I can go and open it in the Hex Editor. So when this opens up, you'll see this view where the hex is in the middle. You have the state inspector on the right on the left that kind of shows you properties. So this is this F3 and 8-bit binary, and then you got 8 bytes, 16, 24, etc. And then you can switch endianness depending on your application. And then on the right here, we have the decoded text, which is trying to kind of interpret this image file. It's a little bit more helpful in a text file, but we can see like the metadata here saying this is a PNG file and headers like that. So if I go in here, I can pretty much break the file if I just pick, like, turn this 3.3 into an FF. And as we see, as I type, it kind of tells you which cells are dirty, and you can also type on this side over here. And then undo, redo all works as well, just like it would in any other editor. So if we just leave it as one cell change, so we're changing this one from 3.0 to FF, and then we save. So then the dirty indicator goes away to signify we've changed the document. And now we can see what happens if we try to open this image preview again. So I've pretty much destroyed this Hex Editor file. I've added this nice red line apparently. Well, you probably wouldn't want to use the Hex Editor for that. The Hex Editor will probably be used for, instead of going from like a working file to a broken file, you'd probably want to go from a broken file to a working file, which clearly I don't know which lines I edited anyways. But that's kind of the general consensus of how it works. If you want to see how it works on a text file, like here's a markdown file. When we reopen this with the Hex Editor, you can see like it's much easier to understand what was going on here. So I could capitalize that and reopen, and it all works kind of the same. So it's just another way for you to interpret data, and it helps with things like hot patching if you don't want to recompile, or just editing. Last time I used this Hex Editor, I edited a Skyrim save file to give myself more arrows. So, I mean, you don't have to use it for anything fancy, but it's something that you can just do within VS Code and kind of gives you a nice native experience in one tool. So that's kind of it for my demo.
Nice. So this is, Logan, this is one of those things where it's like, you look at a Hex Editor and you're like, I don't know why I would need that until you need it. And then at the point that you need it, it's kind of critical. So that was going to be my next question. Like, what are the real world use cases for something like a Hex Editor? But I think the answer is Skyrim files, right?
Yes, more arrows and Skyrim files is definitely the best thing you can do. It was Xbox 360 taking my flash drive from the console to my computer and finding the line. Yeah, it's kind of a lot of like, I don't want to say normal programmers, but a lot of us, we don't like when we're developing high level software, we don't touch the Hex Editor. But I do have a lot of like firmware devs and people working on like embedded controllers who are opening issues saying, I love this, can I do X, Y, Z? So there are people who use this day to day to either patch in fixes without having to recompile code, or just look uncorrupt files. People search malware searches, they look for a sequence of bytes. It allows you to look at that raw data without the interpretation of whatever viewer you're using.
Yeah, so I think the big takeaway from this is no matter how bad you think your day is going, remember someone somewhere is writing hexadecimal code in an editor trying to get something to work. All right, well, that is it for our demos and the stuff that we wanted to cover in this live stream. So with that, let's jump into some of the questions here. Since we just talked about the Hex Editor, Andrew's asking, is there a shortcut to opening that Hex Editor and getting to it? I think that's the question. What's the shortcut to use it? Logan, you still with us?
Yeah. So sorry.
That's all right.
So there's no special shortcut for it. Just I open the command palette, which on default on your system is Control/Command-Shift-P, and that kind of gives you like the quick pick, and then you go reopen editor with, or there's also another command if that's open file using Hex Editor, if you have it already open. Yeah, so reopen editor with, then Hex Editor. You can also on the left in your file explorer, you can right click and hit on your file and hit open with, and that same quick pick will pop up for you to be able to select the file format.
So Rick's got a question here, and it looks like Connor is typing a reply as I speak this, but we're going to do it anyway. But the question was on the Node.js debugging. You can type npm run script server and it launches Chrome, and you can debug the code. But if I use the debug launch with the npm using the launch JSON, it starts the server, but it doesn't launch Chrome in debug mode. How can I set up a launch JSON to do so that it does both? I think this is a common question that even I've had. How does the new JavaScript debugger make this better or solve this?
Yeah, so like by default, like only links open inside the debug terminal actually like are automatically debugged, because like we didn't want to start debugging things that people didn't want to debug. Like if I opened like google.com or something from the terminal, I didn't want to debug that. But there's currently a setting that you can set. It's called like debug.javascript.debug by link options. And if you set that to always, then all links will be debugged. We currently don't have a setting to only debug links that I click through a debug session, but I think that's a good idea to add. So maybe in the next release.
So here's a very interesting question. Leo asked, has anyone been able to get their hands on a Mac developer transition kit with Apple Silicon? Silicon? How do you say that word? Anybody? And does VS Code run on it? The question is basically, have we got a computer that doesn't exist, and have we tested VS Code on it? What is the answer? No answer. Nope, sorry. I don't guess nobody has one. I'm sorry. If we did, we would share the love.
I'm pretty sure the thing there is that like we have the ARM builds for Windows now, but we don't have them for OS X yet. I'm not working on it, but I believe that's being worked on.
All right, Felix is asking a question that everyone wants to know. What are your plans for a full browser version of VS Code? Let's just ask the difficult questions. Thank you, Felix. Who wants to field that one?
I can field that one if you want.
Sure, Chris.
Hey, so a full browserless version of VS Code. We actually, with Visual Studio Code Spaces and GitHub Visual Studio Code Spaces, you do have a full browser-based version of VS Code. I don't know how else to answer that.
Code Spaces. That's the answer. Code Spaces.
Yeah.
How? But not everybody has access to Code Spaces, Chris. How are they supposed to get the access? Should they email you directly?
No. It's not going to do anything. You can go to online.visualstudio.com, I think it is, for Visual Studio Code Spaces. I think.
And do you have to request access still? Is it still like a closed beta?
I don't know, actually. It's a good question because I have access to it. I don't know what it looks like.
Because I feel like Sana, we tweeted that out the other day, and people were like, "Great, cool story," but I can't use it.
Yeah, I think there's still a wait list for it, so you can sign up to get access and join the wait list.
VS Code Spaces is public. All right, so let's see. Guy Waldman had set up, I'm not sure if you're familiar, but there's a new extension for managing personal knowledge bases and notes inspired by the something. What do you think about using code outside? Do you like seeing code used outside of the programming space? I'm not sure I even understand that question. I'm glad I asked it. It's more than just an IDE, like a Spotify extension. Oh, okay, I get it. So having extensions in there that are not related to coding, it's like controlling your Spotify playlist.
Yeah, I actually do use a Spotify extension. So I can vouch for that. I think it would be cool, especially with the custom editor API, to see like what else we can show and do in VS Code.
I didn't know that there was one. I know what I'll be downloading immediately after this is over, which is the Spotify extension. Sana, I think this kind of goes to something that you and I had talked about at GitHub Satellite, which is that like VS Code, when you're in VS Code, you're in this really tight loop, and that anything that keeps you inside of your loop helps you be more productive because you're not context switching. And that includes things like leaving to go to Spotify to change your playlist or stop listening to the same song on repeat, which I do frequently. So for me, at least, I love to see this stuff because it helps me to stay inside of VS Code. All right, let's see here. So I'm not gonna say this name right, but I'm gonna try anyway. I think it's Yitzhak asks, thanks so much. What about performance? Are there any new features that allow VS Code to perform better? Once we have a lot of plugins in VS Code, things can start to perform slow. Anybody want to take that? What do we do about a VS Code instance with a lot of extensions running that is slowed down?
Yeah, I can take that one. So if you are having like VS Code with like a high CPU or it's consuming a lot of memory, then you can try actually running VS Code with all of the extensions disabled, and see if that like we think that a lot of the CPU, like high percentage of CPU you're seeing is caused by an extension, and then you can actually choose to enable select extensions to see which extension might be causing the problem, and then file an issue on that extension's repo. And that's the best way to like report performance issues. I know as a team we are working on potentially moving to Electron 8 and looking at the start of performance of VS Code as an editor to see if we can like show you things when you open up VS Code without like rendering a lot of things.
All right, here's one, anonymous.
Hey, Brooke, can I pile on that question or that
Yes,
answer?
go ahead.
Yeah, there's actually a wiki page at github.com/microsoft/vscode/wiki/performance-issues, which helps you to sort of pinpoint, potential extensions like Sana said that are running slow, but also to like get profiles. So if you can upload that information to us when you submit an issue, it helps us diagnose the problem and figure out what's actually going on. So it's a part trying to understand which extensions are causing the problem, and then if it's the core of VS Code, helping us to understand and diagnose the issue.
Okay. Let's see. Madharesh says, please, can we have settings sync in stable release? Please. There's a please in there. How can you say no to that? What's the timeline for?
It's the ultimate goal, right? No, we're still polishing the settings sync service and experience, and so it's not going to happen. Hang on one second. I'm getting called from outside.
Sounds important.
I can take over. Yeah, we're actually working on this month on doing a couple of different user study sessions to kind of polish the experience and kind of improve what we have currently. So we're hoping that by the end of the month, we can kind of have a better grasp on, what the current experience is, if it's, kind of meets our expectations for it, to be able to release it hopefully in the next release. But who knows, if we keep getting, feedback through GitHub, like if you are using it in Insiders and you have feedback, please feel free to, file issues or, get in touch with us, because we want to be able to get a good gauge from the community on, what works, what doesn't work, and make sure that it works for the masses as well.
And a plug here is VS Code Insiders to get the latest settings sync experience.
Yeah, so for those that don't know, it does exist in Insiders. So if you have Insiders, you can go ahead and use settings sync right now. So you don't have to wait until it hits stable.
Just as an experiment, I wonder if people could drop into chat and just like, do you use Insiders or stable? I just want to know. Like, do you go down the slide feet first, or do you are you like me and you turn around and you go down on your stomach so that you don't hurt yourself? I'm a stable VS Code user. I don't mess around with VS Code insiders. I'm curious, like, what everyone else is doing. You just drop it in the chat and let me know. Stable or insiders? Insiders, stable. Oh, okay, good. Alessandro's got a better way. I'm going with stable. Meanwhile, while that's going on, Stephen has asked if we could kindly put PowerPoint and Outlook also in VS Code to make his life easier. Something that we could consider, maybe both of those items. Could we put Windows inside of VS Code? Is that an option as well? I think that's a little much, Stephen. I like the where your head's at, but I don't know. VS Code is an operating system. Let's see here. Miguel, someone did ask an interesting question early on about visual improvements or changes. They had said something about the icons had changed in the past, and that are there any other visual improvements or changes that are coming down the road that you could share with people that we're looking at?
Yeah, definitely. One of the things, so we did make a lot of effort last year to sort of update all of the icons throughout the UI. And we kind of refer to those as the product icons. And we're slowly working on introducing a new API where extensions, just in the same way that you can produce or create file themes for file icons, like in the Explorer, we're working to make product icon themes available for others, so that if you wanted to customize like all the icons in the activity bar, in the Explorer, essentially any icon that is available, you can then theme it with whatever icon you want. I can show a quick example of what that looks like. I have sort of like a dummy demo kind of app that I've been using. So I have this app or this extension that I created. Let me see if I can enable it. And if you see here on the left-hand side, I've kind of updated the icons in the activity bar. So these are using the Fluent icons. So the Fluent team kind of released their new icons. And so I kind of played in with our API to see what that would look like. So you can kind of see what that could look like. And then eventually we want to be able to get the rest of the UI in there as well. So this is just sort of like one of the steps that we're working on to make things a lot more customizable for all of the users and the extension authors as well.
And Miguel, while we've got you, what is Fluent, just for people that don't know?
Oh yeah, so Fluent is sort of like the Microsoft design language sort of for a lot of their apps that they use, especially with the Office apps. So it's sort of like this kind of almost like the Google material design. That's kind of like all of Google's design language. It's kind of like Microsoft's design language for a lot of their apps. Yeah, and so they recently released a new set of icons for all of their applications, and specifically with Office.
All right, let's do one last question, then we're going to wrap up. Let's go with, let's just do an easy one, low-hanging fruit. Jeremy asks, as a Windows ARM64 support was just released in 1.4.7, thanks to everyone. Well, thank you, Jeremy. When can we expect for many of the core extensions to be supported? For instance, the C++ extension still doesn't support ARM64. And what can the community do to help on this front?
Pick me.
Chris. Go ahead. Back by popular demand.
Yeah, sorry about that. No, I think the best thing to do is to submit issues on the extensions and say, hey, we're looking for support for this. And then if the community then can upvote those issues, and then the team that builds the extension will have a good understanding of the priority of that request. So that's the best way to go about it.
Outstanding. Well, that's it, I think, for our first ever VS Code release live stream. If y'all enjoyed this, please let us know. We'd like to do it again if it's useful and let you ask anything and everything that you want to. I'd like to thank Stephen and Connor, Miguel, Logan, Sana, Chris, everyone who's been on the call to help answer these questions. Again, follow us on Twitter at It's Just the Code, twitter.com/code. for all of the updates and all things Visual Studio Code. And with that, we will wrap up and see about doing this again in maybe a month or so. Who knows? We'll see. Thanks so much for joining us.